Get ready to dive into the world of retro horror and cult cinema releases with the Anchor Bay Archives podcast. Join hosts Garrett from Born to Be Read and CK from DEADPIT Radio as they dig through the vaults of Anchor Bay Entertainment, uncovering hidden gems, behind-the-scenes stories, and bringing tales from the world of horror, sci-fi, and cult cinema classics. From iconic franchise films to underground favorites, they'll be covering it all with their own unique flair. So grab some popcorn, settle in, and join the crew as they live the future by reliving the past with the Anchor Bay Archives.
Howdy, folks, and welcome back. It's another episode of the Anchor Bay Archives podcast. I'm the Creepy Kentuckian.
And I'm Garrett from Born to Be Rad. Man, we got a cool one today. This is one that was your idea. This was one that I didn't even know this thing existed. And you said to me, "Have you ever seen this?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "You got to get it. It's got a slipcover. It's a really cool edition from Anchor Bay, and it's the only physical media that this thing I think has here in the States, right?"
Not necessarily. I was looking this up, but this is Lightning Bug from director Robert Hall. Robert Green Hall is what he was once known as. Makeup effects guy and everything. That's where his bread and butter was at. And this is his directorial debut, which Anchor Bay did a lot of these independent movies back around this time. I think this was 2004, 2005 era. But this does have a Blu-ray from Image Entertainment, and it is one that's out of print, $60-$70 online. So this movie does have its audience, but it's an interesting time, and I kind of wanted to go back there on this episode because around this time period, I don't know if you recall, a lot of the studios, Anchor Bay, like I said, was one of them, were getting a hold of these independently made horror movies and putting them out to mass audiences. Like, your copy has a Best Buy sticker on it. I think these were in Walmart as well. So a lot of these lower budget films were out, and I know Lionsgate did that quite a bit too. Picked up a lot of those back in the day from Lionsgate. But yeah, any recollections around this time period of independent films and just the mass marketing behind these studios getting by them?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I did a video. You can find it in the Anchor Bay Archives on my YouTube channel in the playlist or whatever, talking about how, this same subject, that Anchor Bay had like these titles that they brought to life, similar to kind of what the new Anchor Bay is doing now. Because one of the biggest things I hear when they talk about Anchor Bay currently is, they're just they're putting out a lot of these independent movies that no one knows about. And it's kind of like, yeah, I know why they're doing it. They're trying to establish kind of credit and all that stuff, but it's not something that Anchor Bay never did before. Like, these guys that are running the show now also worked for the company when this stuff was happening. And there was a point in time where they were doing this quite a bit. So I showcased kind of all of these one-offs or these movies that were just unknowns. Anchor Bay printed them up, put them out, and they became kind of small cult classics, cult hits, kind of like, things like Malevolence. Remember, that was like a big one at the time that
was around the same time period, I think. Here.
Yeah, I'm looking at my collection right here. Like, this one wasn't as good, but I can see The Cook. Remember that one they did?
Yeah.
Spiral.
The Garden, Killer. I think, was one. The Tooth Fairy.
There was so many they did that, they really just kind of tried to get people interested in them. So there was always something Anchor Bay was kind of doing at one point. And this one just happened to pass me by until you brought it up. And I went online and snagged it because, I mean, again, this is like probably the most expensive free podcast going right now because we have to go back.
This was not too bad, though.
No, it was
$10-$15, something like that. Yeah.
To be honest, I don't think I paid more than what it says on this price tag here, and it's $15.99 back when this thing came out. So for a movie that is out of print on Blu-ray, it's still very affordable, and you get a nice reflective slipcover here from Anchor Bay. So this was during the era where they started putting some slipcovers on.
They were doing slips before slips were cool.
100% they were. 100%.
This one, though, is Robert Hall, who would later become more well known as the director of Laid to Rest, which was from like 2009, 2010 era. This was made in 2004 and is a pretty much autobiographical story. Small town in Alabama grew up, and they actually filmed it. I was looking this up in his real life hometown of Fairview, Alabama. The story is this kid, Green Graves, I think is the character's name, who is stuck in a weird situation with his mother, is dating this alcoholic, drunk, asshole guy who beats her up all the time. And, this small town that's full of nothing really but churches, and they're all looking down upon him. So I kind of related to that character. Now, he's more into the horror movies, makeup effects, and doing that, and has like a dream of going to Hollywood to make it in the movies, and everyone's kind of mocking him and is like, yeah, big Hollywood guy or whatever else, right? And this is a very, very low budget movie. The reason that I watched this initially was we interviewed Robert Hall on the DEADPIT show back when Laid to Rest was coming out on DVD. One of the cool things about working with Anchor Bay back then, give a shout out to Ed Peters, who was their PR guy. Any release that they had coming out, most of the time, a talent from that release was available to do interviews. So Robert Hall was, I think, the sole person from Laid to Rest. And he did makeup effects in a lot of big budget movies too, up until he passed away, which unfortunately he passed away about 4 years ago, but was doing big mainstream movie makeup effects and stuff. So we definitely wanted to talk to him. And then I'd seen that this movie Lightning Bug was his directorial debut, and went back and watched it and was actually pretty amazed, because this is, I don't want people to get the wrong idea. This isn't really a horror movie. This is more or less like a coming of age, like drama sort of deal. There is horror elements. I think it's set around Halloween. The girl that Graves is dating in the movie works at a video store and's a big horror fan and everything. So there's horror elements to it. He's working, I think Graves is working at a haunted house and making makeup effects and stuff for that. But more or less, this is a biographical movie that Robert Hall made that nobody really references this movie or talks about it or anything. So I definitely wanted to cover this at some point on the podcast and kind of let people know that this is a pretty solid little movie. I mean, it's not perfect. The budget's very small. Some of the acting in it's kind of iffy, right? But overall, man, movies like this, I think that if somebody had gotten a hold of this with a very, much larger budget, they could have had something really cool here, really special here. And I still think it's special, but it's one of those movies that's ultra low budget, man.
Yeah, I mean, it is, but it does work because, again, I had never seen this up until yesterday. And you're right. Like, as much as it is low budget, it is an intriguing, interesting story about him. I didn't realize this was kind of based off his real life. I'm a huge Laid to Rest fan, so it actually is kind of cool, that this is the guy. And to kind of, like you said, horror elements, man, I was excited when he was getting like the makeup effects magazines and VHS tapes in the mail. And like, then he's in his room, like sculpting, and I'm looking at the walls and checking out all the different stuff he's got on there. And it's, it's really cool. It reminds me a lot of, we got a lot of that kind of stuff back in the day with like Salem's Lot and Phantasm, where you had these little kids that were like really in love with horror and you can kind of follow them through. Where this, he was trying to utilize his talents to get out of town, to go to Hollywood, to make something of himself, and then hopefully take care of his family back home. And all these kind of things ensue like throughout his town that just makes it so much harder for him to get out. And you're right. Like, things like the haunted house, like It's an interesting story. It's very basic, but it's cool to see, like I said, a kid of this time and growing up in this area really infatuated with like practical effects. I just like that whole thing.
When I can remember watching this initially because I was expecting, because around this time period, like we were saying, there's a ton of these crazy low budget independent horror movies. So you, with a name like Lightning Bug, you're like, well, what the hell is this about? What is this going to be about? And I think if anything, the name of the movie may have hurt people from wanting to see it. But the marketing, a lot of the times, I mean, for a movie like this, how would you market it, right? I mean, what would you call it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Lightning Bug was pretty random. It kind of, as much as this was more, put together of a movie, but it kind of, to me, at some points felt like I was watching something from the 90s, like Welcome to the Dollhouse or something with like this randomness of the characters where like this is called Lightning Bug. Why? Because when they were kids, they used to chase the little lightning bugs around or whatever. Like, was that the real connection there, or am I missing a bigger picture here?
Yeah, I mean, the thing to do, I guess, in a small town when they were kids is catching lightning bugs or whatever. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that was the big question.
Do you guys have a lot of those where you are?
From time, I mean, a couple of months out of the year, they're pretty, you can noticeably see them. How about you?
Not really. Like, I remember as a kid, there was a period of time where I felt like I saw them like a few times, but I don't think I've seen anything like that in years here.
I think they're more in the deep south, but like we do have them here, but not very many. I mean, very, like, not as many as they show in this movie. But there are some name actors in this. Kevin Gage, who always pretty much plays an asshole in every movie that he's in. He's like the angry stepfather that beats up his mother and is just a crazy ass. Laura Prepon, who was in That 70s Show, I think is what more people would remember her from. And from what I can understand, she basically did this for little to no money because she believed in the project that much. And I think was credited as an executive producer on this. Ashley Lawrence plays Green's mother in this, who there's actually a little bit of an homage, her in the grocery store picking up a Fangoria magazine for her son that has Hellraiser 2 on the cover, which I
didn't even put two and two together on that.
Yeah.
Sick.
I thought that was kind of cool. But
and then what was the cop guy's name? That dude?
Hal Sparks, yeah. Because I remember him from like, wasn't he on like one of those VH1 shows or something like that?
You know what's funny? When I saw him, I knew it right away. I'm like, I know this guy, but I couldn't put my finger on where I knew him from. But yeah, that dude.
Yeah, I think he's on like a lot of those talking head shows from back in the day, like I Love the 90s or whatever it was on VH1. But yeah, I think this may have been set in like the late 80s as well. They don't really say, but when Robert Hall passed away, and I think you can go back. I mean, I think this was in 2001. We talked about it on the show, and it was one of those cases too where like it really. I didn't know him. I'd met him at a convention, and we talked to him on the show. But like, such a wasted talent, man. And I think that was the thing. Like, he was, of course, he made it as an effects guy. But I just always went back to this movie because this was his debut movie. And a lot of things maybe didn't work in it, but like it had heart, and
Definitely
he was one of those guys that, and I think for people that knew him, like he was probably his own worst enemy is what people said, because, he had all the ability in the world, not only in the makeup effects thing, but he definitely had a knack for filmmaking too. And, unfortunately, I think they did Laid to Rest was kind of a big hit. I don't know if the sequel did as well. And then
I don't think it did, for whatever reason. I mean, I think it did okay, but I mean, that first one, in my opinion, hit as hard as Terrifier did at that point in time. Like the first one, like not Terrifier 2, but like it was I think it was kind of ahead of its time with like what they, the killer had like the chrome mask, and then he had the little video, like the little GoPro camera where he'd record the killings, like, and it'd be on, like, that was something that was a little bit different. He had that badass shark knife or whatever. And they hyped up a sequel. I think even like Danielle Harris jumped in the sequel and all this other stuff because it was a lot of buzz around this. And then unfortunately after that, he passed away, and that kind of scrapped everything, I guess.
Yeah, I think he was working on the third one. But yeah, he had done like mainstream movies up until, like, I think there were a couple that were done he's credited after, posthumously, right? I'm going to get it right, posthumously. And but yeah, I mean, like I was saying, he was one of those guys that had every bit of talent to go like really far in the movie business, but he kind of got in his own way, unfortunately. But yeah, this is a great example of, what could have been, I think, with him. And this is definitely a fun little movie that not too many people really reference, or I don't think very many people have even seen. So I would definitely recommend going and picking this DVD up. Now, this DVD was originally released August the 9th, 2005. So nearly 20 years ago, which is crazy. I hate looking back at these dates and it's like, oh, that was 20 years ago.
But it doesn't feel like that. I was with somebody last night and they were like, oh, yeah, 2003. And she's like, oh, so it's kind of new. And then all of a sudden she stops and she was like, I just said it's kind of new. And I'm like, yeah, I feel the same way. And it's like, that was literally like over 20 years ago. And like anything like post 2000s in my head is like modern. Like, it's so
when
odd,
I always go
right?
back to, it's like, okay, in 2005, what was 20 years ago from 2005? 1985. So at that time, I would be like, oh, that's an old movie, man. But
right, and that's what's so crazy is like now these movies that feel like they were 25 years ago or like 40 something years ago or more, right? So it's insane to think about. But I think this is a sleeper. I'm actually really glad that you showed me this or told me to grab this, because number one, I added it to my collection, and it's always cool to have these kind of additions like that Anchor Bay kind of brought to the dance here with this lightning bulb. They gave him the chance and kind of see what happened. And I think it was a pretty, like you said, it was a good kickoff flick for him. And, hopefully we're going to be doing an episode on Laid to Rest and how huge of a success that was. And doing a little bit of research on Laid to Rest, I don't know if that has any other edition besides the Anchor Bay DVD here in the States. Chrome Skull has a Blu-ray, but I could not find a Laid to Rest Blu-ray anywhere, which if that's the case, that edition that Anchor Bay did is still pretty badass, had a slipcover, and that's a franchise I would love to see someone try to get their claws in and bring that guy back, because I think he was just way ahead of his time, and I think he'd probably fit in better now in horror than he did back then. So we could talk a lot about that.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely want to revisit those at some point in the future. But yeah, like Robert Hall, very talented guy. I think he left a lot to be done in his life. Unfortunately, passed away at a pretty young age. But yeah, I would highly recommend all you guys going and checking this movie out. Not very hard to get a hold of. The odds on it getting another re-release are probably very slim. Like, I don't know how that would work with his estate. I don't think that he was married or had any kids or anything. So that could cause an issue from stories that I've been told in the past regarding some of these movies coming out. So definitely you'll want to pick this one out. This is a nice edition as well. There's audio commentaries and the making of and all that good stuff. And it's a good way to remember a really, really talented guy, nice guy and everything. I've heard plenty of stories. I know Sean Clark was really close with him as well. But yeah, I mean, small town success story. I looked up, I think his town in Alabama, Fairview, if I'm not mistaken, like less than 500 people in the whole town. Wow. Very small town in Alabama. So pretty huge success story. And this is his story. It's the character, Robert Green Hall is his full name. And he kind of took on, gave the lead character his name is Green in this. So high recommendation, guys. And this one, yeah, pretty easy to find. A lot cheaper than the Blu-ray.
Yeah, definitely one to add to the list if you're big into finding those kind of cult classes that Anchor Bay brought to life. So thank you, man. I appreciate you showcasing this one to me. And hopefully you guys watching or listening to this podcast right now, maybe open your eyes to something like this, or maybe you even have it in your collection and you've never even watched the thing. Definitely want to check it out. And hopefully we're going to do more of these kind of uncovered gems throughout the Anchor Bay catalog. So guys, thanks again for checking this out.
So we will catch you guys next time. And remember to stay tuned to the Anchor Bay archives, where we are living the future
by reliving the past.
For more exclusive content, be sure to check us out, Anchor Bay Archives on Instagram, our individual YouTube pages, Born to Be Rad and DEADPIT, and be sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.